Good morning, everybody. How's your day so far? That sounded terrible. How's your day so far? That was a bit better. So some time ago, I was in Switzerland. It was Thursday, and I had a flight scheduled for Friday morning, 8 a.m. to be in Helsinki. I woke up with plenty of time to make the flight, but there was an unexpected snowstorm. So by the time I got to the airport from the mountains in Switzerland, it was 8 o'clock and the flight had left. So I told them there's something called Shabbat and sunset and exact times. Okay. They said, oh, we understand. There's another flight leaving at 9 in 1 hour. It's going to stop in Germany. And it will be in Finland on time for the sunset and the Shabbat. It's all going to work out. So I said, thank you very much. I said, I had ordered a kosher meal on the first flight. Maybe I can get that on the second flight. They said, look, we need 24 hours to guarantee that. But we'll put it into the computer and we'll see. You know, pray to God. So we're flying and everybody's eating, freshing in the morning. I said, could I have my breakfast, please, kosher breakfast? They said, did you order one? So I said, yes. They didn't ask when. They just said, I said, yes. They said, what's your name? Greenberg, Mr. Greenberg. They look, they say, there's one kosher meal for a Mr. Lang. So I said, is he on the plane? They weren't sure. I said, it's a shanda to throw out a kosher meal. You have one kosher meal to throw it out. See if he's on the plane. There was an unexpected snowstorm in the mountains. Maybe Lang is stuck in the snow somewhere. I'll be very happy to eat the meal and make the appropriate brachot. So they say, Mr. Lang, kosher meal. No one responds. Okay, they give me the meal. I asked them a Jewish question. I said, by the way, where was Mr. Lang going? They had all the papers in front of them. He was stopping in Germany and he was on the way to Helsinki. So I figured I'll have lunch on him as well. We land in Germany, we switch flights, everybody's eating lunch in the plane. I say, can I have my kosher lunch? Did you order one? Yes. What's your name? I figure I'm going to expedite the process here. I say, Mr. Lang. She looks at the paper, we have a kosher meal for Mr. Greenberg. I said there was an unexpected snowstorm. Maybe Greenberg stuck in the Alps somewhere. Throw out a kosher meal, a chutzpah. See, make an announcement, see if he's on the plane. But friends, if it's on a serious note, as we travel and journey through life, we all experience challenges, troubles. It's never smooth. And so today, I want to spend some time studying together with you a beautiful story in our prophets. It comes from the book of Kings, Malachim. And we'll look at it through the eyes of the commentators and the mystics that developed this story in terms of optimistic approach to life and how it could be helpful in so many arenas in our daily struggles. So here's the story. Elisha, the famous prophet, would travel through Israel to inspire and uplift the Jewish community. This was before Facebook. Many people didn't know who he was. So he came to a certain town. He's walking through the town. The Isha Hashunamis, a woman, her name was the Isha Hashunamit, sees a stranger, a Jewish fellow. He seems not to have a place to stay. So she says, come to our house. My husband and myself would be happy to host you. You can eat dinner, you can sleep. And he accepts the hospitality. A few days later, he leaves. This woman, the Isha Hashunama, she turns to her husband and says, I've been observing this fellow. He's a man of God. There's something very special about him. So, if ever you're in town and you see him, invite him to our home. Make sure he's comfortable. And the Tanakh, the prophets tell us that as time went on, whenever he would come to town, he was invited to their home and he would stay there. At a certain point, she tells her husband, why don't you build a loft, an extension to our home, so we can have a private room? He could be very comfortable, and they did that. Okay. Years pass. He always would stay there. Finally, the day comes. He calls this woman and he says, I'm not going to be coming back to this town anymore. I'm going to be in other places. You've been so kind to me, so gracious. What can I do for you to repay all this chesed, all the kindness you have been doing for me? I have connections to the king. I know people. What do you need? And she says, I need no favors. I don't need your connections. In Hebrew, she said, Betoch ami ani yoshevet. I'm a regular citizen. I don't need any special treatments, nothing. He says, okay. Elisha calls his assistant Gehazi. And he says, Gehazi, what could we do for this woman? And Gehazi looks at Elisha and he says, Elisha, don't you know? She's been married for many, many years. She has no children. You're a prophet. If you can give her a blessing to have children, that would be the most extraordinary thing you could do for her. So Elisha says, okay, call her back. And Gehazi rushes over and calls her. And Elisha tells her in a year from now, you're going to be blessed and you're going to have a child. And she says, what are you talking about? Don't give me blessings. What? And Elisha says, no, done deal. And the next verse tells us that a year later, she had a beautiful baby boy. So far, it's a lovely story in the prophets. The man of God said something and it came true. It's all wonderful. But it's not a Jewish story. Did you ever read a Jewish story that ended happily ever after? If you want to know cultures, look at their stories. There's no such story. We finish with Pharaoh, we have Haman on the horizon. It doesn't, there were two Jews who didn't see each other for a long time. Yankel and Mendel, they encounter each other on the street. So Mendel says, I'm rushing to a big business appointment. But in one word, just tell me, how are you? So he says, in one word, good. So he says, okay, 2 words. He says, 2 words, not good. Jewish story. It's good, it's not. Or worse, I shouldn't tell this, but I'll say it anyway. You know, Sunday morning, there was a doctor. He calls his Jewish patient. He says, Sammy says, yeah, I got the results from your blood test. I have bad news and I have worse news. So Sammy says, give me the bad news first. He says, I got the results from your blood test. You only have 24 hours to live. So Sammy says, Gewalt, what possibly could be worse than that? He says, I've been trying to reach you since yesterday. Okay, but in any event, she has a child. Now the story takes a dramatic, frightening turn. Next verse. It's about 10 years later, it seems. This child is going out to the fields somewhere in Israel to help his father, or to see his father harvesting the field. It's a hot summer day in Israel, really hot. Scorching day. The child goes out to the field, and he must have got dehydrated, sunstroke, something horrible happened. And he turns to his dad, he's feeling faint, and he says, Abba, father, Roishi, my head. His head is pounding. And his father doesn't realize how bad it is. He tells one of the co-workers, bring him back home to his mom. The mom will know how to deal with this. And as the child is being brought home, his condition rapidly worsens. The child is brought to the mom. And the next verse tells us the greatest tragedy that possibly could befall parents occurs. The child passes away, dies, as the mother is holding this child, this gift of God, this gift of the prophet. She takes the child, rushes to Elisha's room, places the child on his bed. She tells her assistants, fast, prepare for me the horses or the donkeys. I'm traveling to Elisha. I know where he is. He's at Har HaKarmel. Fast, prepare everything. I'm out of here in a half hour. During this rush of preparation, the husband walks in. He has no idea what happens. Now listen to this baffling verse. He turns to her and says, you're rushing, you're going somewhere, but there was nothing on your schedule today. Where are you rushing? Is everything okay? Vatoimer, and she says, Shalom. Everything's perfect, wholesome, wonderful. Vatoimer Shalom. It's wonderful, it's good. How could she say that? The greatest catastrophe just struck her and her husband. How are you? Shalom. Bizarre. She rushes out. She's traveling to the mountain. She's coming close to where Elisha is. Elisha looks out the window. She's far away. But with the eye of a prophet, he immediately realizes that something is horribly wrong. He recognizes her. And he calls Gehazi, and he says, Gehazi, rush out to her, intercept her before she gets here. And I want you to ask her 3 questions. And here they are. Ask her, Hashalim lach, are you okay? Hashalim le'ishech, is your husband okay? Hashalim la'yoled, is your child, is that boy okay? And Gehazi rushes out, and he runs to the Isha Hashunamis, and he says, how is your family? How are you? Your husband, your child? How is everything? Vatoimer shalom. Everything's fine, wholesome. It's going to be good. At this point, you think she lost her mind. Something's wrong with the woman. Maybe she lost it. But you see, it's all with a strategy. She was thinking the entire time, because when she rushes into Elisha, she has a different story to tell. She says, Elisha, I never asked for this child. You came to me and said, I'm going to give you a blessing, I'm going to help you. And I said, no. I said, Betoch ami ani yoshevet, don't do me any favors. And you forced this blessing on me. It wasn't my request. And therefore, this is your responsibility. You talk to God. You do whatever it is you have to do. I want my child back. How could you do this to me? And Elisha realizes that she is 100% correct. He packs up his belongings, and there's verses, but to make it short, he rushes back to the child. And here we have one of the great miracles in all of Jewish literature, in the prophets. Elisha goes to the child and brings him back to life. Literally brings him back to life, an unparalleled kind of miracle. And the child is restored to flourishing health, and he becomes a great individual. That's the story. So the question, many questions. The question that many of the commentators ask is, what was she doing? What happened here? And they explain it this way. Now, I'll tell you what the commentators say. This level of faith and optimism is at a very high level. But over the next few minutes, we'll discuss how commentators bring it down into very practical and realistic levels. So we're going to start, it's going to be at a very powerful level, but it becomes very practical as we look at it through the eyes of our tradition. The commentators point out that she knew that in this situation, the man of God had the capacity to bring the child back. She had that absolute faith. She knew if she thought positive and did not allow one negative word to pass her lips and kept up the positive perspective, positive things were going to happen. She had that tremendous faith. Hard to imagine. And she also knew that if she would share this with her husband or others, they would tell her she's nuts, she's not realistic, don't go to the prophet, it's all over. And she did not want to lose her faith or her optimism or her positive perspective. And because she kept that faith, and because she had that trust and optimism, the commentators say, Mitzvah David, the Rabbi, and others say it was specifically because she had that faith that allowed and triggered the possibility for that miracle to happen. And they add, if she didn't have that faith, if she would have said things are terrible, there's no hope, she would never have had that miracle. Okay, it's a very lofty level. But the same applies to individuals and to most individuals. When people are younger, they have certain dreams. A certain dream. A dream of perfect relationships, perfect business, perfect children, perfect life. But most often that dream is shattered. It dies. People think of themselves a certain way, and then reality strikes, and a person could say, forget about the dreams of my youth, forget about these higher ideals, done. And the message of the story is a person should never say, the great ambitions and my great dreams, which are good and powerful, I'm going to surrender and give up on. If we have a positive perspective and do whatever we can within the natural spectrum, the reasonable spectrum, the responsible spectrum, then that itself triggers beautiful blessings and changes reality. So let me make it very practical. Bring it from a faith level to a very high level to a very practical level to illustrate how it is that in most cases in life, our perspective determines reality. So let me say that again. In most instances in life, the events themselves do not determine reality, our perspective does. So if we're able to say, Hashalim lach, things, I have a positive perspective, that positive perspective alters reality. The question the prophet asked is not only how are you? In Hebrew, the word Hashalim lach also means, what kind of perspective do you have in life? What is your viewpoint? How do you view things? In this story, she said, Vataymer shalom, I view things in the most positive way. So here's a true story. A couple went on a honeymoon. Instead of a hotel, they said, we're going to go to a rustic cabin somewhere in the forest. That's what they did. The first night, about 1 in the morning, woodpeckers come to the wooden roof, and they start to pound away and eat the roof. 20 minutes later, a minion of woodpeckers come. 2 minions. It's 100 woodpeckers. They're making tremendous noise. Can't sleep. It's a ruckus. Okay? The whole night goes in that fashion. The next night, the same thing happens. 3 nights. Horrible, you might say. So the couple on the way back decided this. They said what happened wasn't a bad thing. It was a wonderful thing. It was a very successful honeymoon. The only thing we have to do is figure out how it was successful. We decided successful, now how? And on the way back, they came up with an idea. The idea was to create a cartoon, and it became a great commercial success. Many of you know it. It's called Woody Woodpecker. Woody Woodpecker, on the way back, these people, their name was Walter and Grace Lance. This was the couple this happened to. On the way back, they came up with the idea. Walter was the illustrator, and Grace was the voice. They had the first episode in the car on the way back. The general structure of it. 50 years later, you can Google this. 50 years later, on their wedding anniversary, Grace said those were the best nights of our life. That changed their whole life. So now my question to you is, was the event that happened that night, what was the truth of it? Was it a good thing or was it a bad thing? What's the real truth? What's the answer? Huh? I can't hear. Bad. People are saying bad. Everybody agrees that it was bad? Huh? People are saying good. Okay, everybody's right, you know. There used to be a teacher from the shtetl and yeshiva who used to say, in the Yiddish accent, you're 100% correct. Now let me show you why you are wrong. But the real answer is everybody's right. No one's wrong. But the real answer is, know what the real answer is? It depends who's in the cabin. It depends who's in the cabin. If you're in the cabin with your spouse, imagine you're in your cabin, this cabin, honeymoon with your spouse, and you say, you're an idiot. Why did you come up with this cockamamie idea to go to a cabin, meshugana, and you start fighting? It is a bad thing. That's reality. It becomes a bad thing. The relationship could start in a bad fashion. So if you say it's bad, it really does become bad, and that's the truth of the reality. But if you're a couple and you're in the cabin and you say, no, we couldn't sleep for 3 nights, gewaldig, wonderful. It was a wonderful thing. Now let's figure out how. Then it really does become good. So the event itself was not good and it was not bad. Who determines if it's good or bad? Hashalem lach. What kind of perspective do we have? If we answer shalom, we have a positive outlook. How are we going to make this positive? Then what happens? Then it becomes positive. But if we say it's bad, it becomes bad. So in most cases, not in every case, but in most cases in life, in most of our experiences, even if there's a challenge, if we say, I'm going to have the positive perspective, we change reality. Another story, absolutely true story. Again, a tremendous commercial success. There was a chemist, a scientist. He worked for a year on creating a new glue, a new kind of bonding agent. And at the end of the year, when he unveiled it to his peers, the scientists in the lab, it was a failure. It didn't stick. It was sticky, but it didn't stick. So they told him, you wasted a year and you'll go further. He said, no. This wasn't a failure. There's something good here. And he thought about it for a few days. And he came up with a use for it, and we all use it, those Post-it notes. The Post-it notes, they stick, but they don't stick. That's exactly how they were created. But most scientists, most people in the lab would have said it failed, and it would have failed. But because he said it was a success, it became a success. A powerful image. It's easy to remember. You go out, you look at a sea or an ocean. You look at sailboats. Sailboats. So you see, you think, what determines the direction of a sailboat? Is it the wind or is it the sails? What is it? Wind or the sails? Huh? You can't both be right this time. So if you look at the sea, you'll notice that you have a wind, one wind, and one sailboat's going north and the other's going south. Because the wind doesn't determine the direction, the sails do. The sails determine the same exact wind, one north, one south. So as we journey on life, the sea of life, we journey, and there's waves and there's storms and challenges. We are the captain of our vessel, of the ship, and our sails are our thoughts. Who controls our thoughts? We're the captain. We could control and determine how we are going to interpret the event. How are we going to grab the wind? And what momentum are we going to take from the wind? So you can have the storm and it affects two people, and one person sails to a happy harbor of new blessing, of some special things, and the other ends up in a kvetchy place. But it wasn't the wind, it was the sails. It was how did we use our thought process to get to that place? Here's one of my favorite Hasidic tales. It's charming, it's funny, but it's deep. It's deceptively deep. So here's the story. There was two brothers, Zusha and Elimelech. L'chaim. Oh, Zusha and Elimelech. So, they were great sages, pious people. What they would do, an author of a great work, but what they would do for a few weeks, every year, every other year, was they would go to a town or a Jewish city that no one recognized them. No one knew who they were. They were dressed like paupers, like beggars. So they would come, and no one would give them respect. They were treated like regular commoners. And when they were there, they would try to teach some Torah, help out, do what they could to help people, strengthen community. And they did this also in a way so they should live without the honor and the respect they normally got. That's what they did. Spiritual kind of exercise. They come to a certain town, and there were other poor people in the town who were nasty people, horrible people. So they see two new fellow Jews coming, but they figure these two people are going to take away, diminish the money we receive from charity. So they went to the police officers, to the authorities, and they said, these two new people, they're thieves, they're criminals, they're on the run. So Zusha and Elimelech, these two pious sages, are arrested and thrown into this horrible dungeon, prison. There's about 50 or 60 hardened criminals, Cossacks there. Okay? They're there. 3, 4 in the morning, Zusha looks at his brother Elimelech. Elimelech is crying. So Zusha says, Elimelech, where's your faith? You're in prison for a few hours. You're already surrendering. You're crying. Where's your emunah, your faith, your betachin, your trust in God? So Elimelech says, Zusha, you think I'm afraid? I'm crying because I lack faith? No. He says, in 3 hours, in 2.5 hours, the sun's going to rise. And I'm going to have a mitzvah to pray and wrap tefillin. But in the center of the room, you'll excuse me, this was a real prison. There was a big bucket, that was the bathroom. That's how it was in those days. Bathroom, a big bucket in the center of the room. According to Jewish law, you can't pray. You can't wrap tefillin in that environment. Absolutely not allowed to. You can't. So Zusha tells Elimelech, tomorrow is going to be the first day since my bar mitzvah where I can't pray and I can't wrap tefillin when I'm obligated to do so. And I don't have my connection to God and I'm broken up because of it. So Zusha tells Elimelech, who says you can't pray? How do you know this? So he says, what do you mean? And he starts to quote him the verses in the code of Jewish law that clearly state such. So Zusha tells Elimelech, the same way you connect to God every day by following halakha Jewish law that tells us you connect to God through tefillin and through prayer, tomorrow you'll connect to God in a few hours by following what God wants by not wrapping tefillin and not praying. Hey, I see people are smiling. Don't try this at home. You know? It's only in that environment. So Elimelech thinks about it. He says, wow, that's a good insight. I completely didn't view it that way. There's truth there. Unbelievable. So I'm going to have a connection to God tomorrow. Huh? So he jumps up. It's 4 in the morning and he starts to dance. He's celebrating. So Zusha and Elimelech, 4 in the morning, in the midst of the Cossacks, are dancing. The chief criminal wakes up and he says, wow, these Jews, I heard about them. This is an admirable people, optimistic group here. They're arrested. In a few hours, they're already throwing a party. They have a bar mitzvah, a wedding, celebration. So he was very impressed. He joins them. So you have the 2 Jewish sages dancing and the chief Cossack. All the other prisoners and the criminals see what's going on. They join the dance. Okay, 50 people dancing, celebrating. The warden, a miserable creature, wakes up. He never saw this before. He never heard such celebration. He's miserable. He's a miserable character. He hated joy. And he rushes in. He says, stop dancing. He's ignored. He pulls one of the thieves over. He says, who instigated this? The Jews. The Jews did it, not us. It's all the Jews. He says, how is it possible, the Jews? They're the weakest 2 people. You're all buff, powerful. These are 2 little Jewish scholars. How'd they get everybody to celebrate? So the peasant thief says, look, I want to tell you something. These guys are big philosophers. I was able to follow some of their conversation, very deep stuff. They were saying that the bucket in the center of the room created a new relationship with the infinite one, blessed be he. Now, how on earth did that bucket create divine new connections with infinity? Whoa, this is beyond. But that's what it was. So the warden rushes into the room and he pulls out the bucket. He rushes out with the bucket. So Zusha turns to Elimelech and he says, Shachris, Shachris, wrap tefillin. So in life, sometimes we're in environments where there's challenges, there's noxious fumes. We go through a difficulty in life. We're in a confined space with real problems. Judaism never ever denies reality. Pain is real. Challenges are real. People go through difficult things. And in Jewish law, it's reflected. So a person could be in a negative environment, going through a real difficulty in life. And God forbid to say, oh, this problem is wonderful. No, it's not. And we don't want it. And we pray for its removal. But sometimes a person could say, this is not part of my life. My relationship with God doesn't exist. And a person could be stuck there for a very long time. But what the story reminds us is at a certain point, Zusha turns to Elimelech and says, yes, we don't want to be here. But because we're experiencing this right now, it's divine providence. This is our life. And never say that right now we can't have a relationship with God. And we shouldn't feel that somehow, even in this negative space, we can't use it somehow to bring blessing or holiness into the environment in a way that perhaps we didn't ask for and don't want. even as we pray for its removal. And as a person is able to garner a positive perspective and even a celebration in this instance, then it is that joy and optimism itself that allows the negativity, the negative issue to be removed from our lives so we can celebrate in positive and beautiful ways, as Judaism wants us to. In cognitive psychology and in positive therapy, which is cognitive psychology, is one of the most successful in the last decades in terms of helping people recover from negative experiences and difficult situations in life. Because you see, for decades, Freud's notions that a human being in many ways is a victim, in many ways is a victim of childhood experiences, anxieties and depressions, neurosis, psychosis, charosis, all very Jewish things. But in many ways, we're victims of circumstance, of environment, and so you need to kvetch on a couch for 30 years about, your parents or somebody. And that, in California, they have now new therapy. It's underwater basket weaving therapy. They actually don't have it, but you believe me, because they will. They're working on it. Of course, there's place for some of this stuff, but the overwhelming thrust of it was a person is a victim. You're a victim. And you're a victim to your moods and to the way you feel, and other people controlled your life. But positive psychology, one of the founders of it is, so many of them actually are Jewish, focused on the mind, and meditation controls the emotions, and when we think positively and we reframe things, then our reality and our feelings change. So Seligman, who's one of the founders of this field, has a book, a very interesting book, it was a bestseller, called Learned Optimism. And the thesis of the book is that everybody could learn to be optimistic. Wow, it's late. Okay. So he says, they went to the largest, in the book, he has many illustrations of it, that science did. Tremendous research. So I'll share one of them. He says that his team of researchers from university in Pennsylvania went to the largest life insurance company in America, Metropolitan Life. And in life insurance, the people there, the salespeople, face a lot of rejection on a daily basis. So he went to Metropolitan Life, and he said, how do you hire people? And it was all cognitive ability, education and IQ. So he said, we want to create a new test. It's not going to measure people's IQ or what education they had. It's going to look at how they view things in life, in a positive way or in a negative way. Okay, they did that. They created a whole new test. And they gave it to the people that failed the test in the last 2 years, but they scored high in terms of optimism and their perspective in life. And they were hired. So here you had two teams now working in Metropolitan Life. The people who were more sophisticated, higher IQ, better education, and people that had more optimistic perspective. In the first year, the optimists outsold their smarter counterparts by 22%. And in the second year, by 57%. 57%. And over there, they said they thought there was going to be some equivalence, but they never imagined that people that have an optimistic viewpoint, it affects their interactions and their business in incredible ways. And he said that is because in life often no's and negative things accumulate. But if you view things in a positive way and you can reframe things so that it changes the way we view reality, and it changes our life. And so that's one question, Hashalom Loch, how do you view reality? And the response is Shalom. She says, I view things in a positive way, and things change that way. And the second question the Prophet asks is, Hashalom Le'ishech, how do you view your spouse? How do you view your spouse? You could view your spouse, husbands and wives, they know each other's weaknesses and mishagas best. It's very easy to look at your spouse and look and find the negative things. It's very easy. But the question is, Hashalim li'ishach, are we looking at our spouse and seeing the blessings they bring to our life, focusing on their virtues and nurturing those? Or are we doing the opposite? There was a fellow, a simple Jew, and he loved the mitzvah of buying lulav and esrog. That was his big mitzvah of the year, and the holiday of Sukkot. So, he would save up for it. One year there was a harsh winter. He goes to buy the lulav and esrog for the holiday of Sukkot. The 4 kinds of species. It's very expensive. 150 ruble. He comes home, he tells his wife, 150 ruble, astronomical price. Not going to do it. Can't do it. It's the day before Sukkot, and he remembers in Judaism there's a principle called the mitzvah of the moment. The mitzvah of the moment means that the mitzvah at the moment reigns supreme. It's the most important mitzvah, the one right in front of you now. So he says, tefillin, I don't have to wrap throughout the whole holiday of Sukkot. I'm going to sell my tefillin. I'm going to celebrate the mitzvah of the moment properly. And somehow God will help. I'll buy my tefillin back after the holiday somehow. So he sells his tefillin and he buys the 150 ruble lulav and esrog. He comes home, he says, honey, I bought the... She's not home. Okay, he puts it down on the counter in the kitchen. He's exhausted, he takes a nap. He wakes up, he hears his wife, he says, honey, I bought the lulav and esrog. How? How did you buy it? I sold my tefillin. Why did you do that? He says, oh, the mitzvah of the moment. And that's a... She says, okay. She says, let me see it. It's so beautiful. He comes into the kitchen. He said, I put it right on the kitchen counter. Where's the... She says, oi, gewalt. I needed to make an applesauce. And I saw a nice lemon. It looked bright. It was very beautiful. A good specimen. I crushed it up and I squeezed it. And it's in the applesauce. And she was expecting him to blow a fuse. Suddenly he rushes over. He embraces her and he starts to dance. So she says, did you go meshuggah? How come you're not screaming? He says, because the mitzvah of the moment is to control my anger and love my wife. You can look at your spouse, and every spouse dices up an esrog from time to time and say, what a shlemiel did I marry? What is this? You could do that. Or you could say, Hashalom lech, I'm going to look at the mitzvah of the moment. I'm going to look at that in the most optimistic way and somehow learn to dance. And if in a relationship you could look at your spouse and say, how is Hashalom le'ishach? How do you view your spouse? V'atoimer shalom, to view your spouse in the most beautiful way. To learn how to dance and celebrate even when the esrog's in the applesauce or other interesting things. But when we do that, it brings a joy into the home. It brings a joy into our hearts, into our spouse's house, and to our family. And so, the final question, Hashalom la'yolad, how do you view your child? Final question. It's easy to look at a child and blame the child and yell at the child. How come you got a 99, not 100? Jewish parents do that, right? The Jewish kid comes home from school, his report card is filled with F's, it's all a big failure, and he sees the father is furious. So with artful innocence, he looks at the dad and he says, Dad, what do you think the trouble with me is? Hereditary or environment? But we say, oh, I caught my child doing a sin. I caught my child doing something bad. We have to catch our children doing mitzvot much more than we catch them doing something bad. Hashalom la'yolad, how do we view our children, our grandchildren, other people's children? How do we view the people we teach? So if we say Hashalom la'yolad, if we look at a child and we sing their praise and we praise them, then we bring that out and we make that reality become very, very real. I'll conclude with this. It says finished. Yeah, I got it. I'm looking at it in an optimistic way. Finish means 5 more minutes. It's optimistic for me, not for the other speaker, but that's a different... So we're almost done. There's a Mishnah that says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, a great sage, one of the great sages. In Jewish history, he had 5 extraordinary disciples. 5 Talmidim hayol Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, 5 extraordinary disciples. And the Mishnah then goes through their names. It says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai used to name each of them, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yesi, Rabbi Yeshua. and he would recount their praise. He would often praise them. He would say wonderful things about them. And then the Mishnah goes on to say what it is he used to say often. He would say, this one is incredibly creative, and you have a great memory, and you have a special awe of God. So the commentaries ask, this doesn't belong in a legal text. It belongs in a documentary. It belongs in biography and history, not in a Mishnah. And they answer, no, this is a legal text that's in the Mishnah for a very important reason. The Mishnah is answering how it is that one Jewish leader raised 5 extraordinary teachers who were all the leaders of the Jewish nation in the 2nd century. How did he do it? And the law is, it's a law for teachers and parents. It's because he used to look at his students, and he would look at them in a beautiful way. And he would let them know about the qualities they have. Often, he would catch them doing what was right, and he would say, look at the capacities you have. He would nurture them. He would look at the most positive way. And because he was positive about them, he brought out beautiful things in them. And so, friends, every single day we're really asked these 3 questions. We are asked every day, Hashalim lach, how are we going to live today? What is our perspective going to be? Every day we have to answer that question. Are we going to view things in the most positive way or not? Hashalim li'ishek, how are we going to view our spouse? Every day we're asked that question. Hashalim la'yoled, how are we going to view our children and grandchildren? Every day. And may God help us, please God, that we should be able to answer all of those questions every day. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Thank you very much.